Well, welcome to all of you. It's so lovely to see you all here. We have a full class with 18 people, and then myself, and this is Jessie Bozeman. She is my assistant in this class, so there'll be 20 of us when we're all here. I want to congratulate you on signing up to take an 8-week mindful self-compassion class. That seems like a brave choice. If you're like I was when I took this not that long ago, 18 months or so ago, I was sitting in your seat. I didn't really have a very clear idea of what I was getting myself into. I knew just enough to know it sounded interesting and decided to, even though I couldn't get anyone to go with me, I really wanted to go with somebody I knew. I couldn't get anyone to, I just decided to try it, and I'm very glad I did, and I'm sure you all will feel that way too at the end of our 8 weeks together. So we're going to start with a real brief meditation, just kind of we'll generally call it a soft landing, just a way to not only be physically in the space, but kind of come into the space and, find our body here, be in our human animal a little bit. But before we do that, I want to read a short essay written by Dan Nussbaum. And it's really for all of you, knowing that some of you will have tons of mindfulness or meditation experience, and some of you will have absolutely none, and a little bit of everything in between. I've been a person who has had a meditation practice for quite a while, and I still feel like this really speaks to me. So it's called You Have Permission. You have permission to do the meditation practice you've been doing all along. You have permission to believe in it, or question it, or enjoy it, or let it take you where it takes you. You have permission to be bored. How else will you ever get to the bottom of boredom? You have permission to try something else. You have permission to think. You have permission to worry. You have permission to wonder if you're doing it right. You have permission to wonder what doing it right means. You have permission to see yourself wondering. Did you start meditation to become a good meditator? You have permission to do it wrong. But if you have permission to do it wrong, how can you do it wrong? You have permission to be bad. You have permission to remember what it was like to be carefree. You have permission to doubt those memories. You have permission to get back to those memories, whether you made them up or not. You have permission to know how you make up memories. You have permission to go over German verbs. You have permission to think about the different grades of motor oil. You have permission to wonder, how is this meditation? You have permission to note body sensations. You have permission to do something else with body sensations, love them, be suspicious of them, forbid them, give them meaning, question that meaning. You have permission to have feelings. You have permission to need someone, to worry out of habit, to fear vaguely, to feel disgust, to insist on getting things your way. You have permission to let things go on. You have permission to find yourself in unexpected mind states. You have permission to get lost. You have permission to be curious and interested. You have permission to get transfixed. You have permission to feel calm. You have permission to feel sleepy. You have permission to sleep. How else will you know about waking up if you don't have permission to be asleep? You have permission to know yourself in meditation. You have permission. You have permission. You have permission. So, a short meditation. I ask that you try to find yourself a comfortable position. And you are welcome to be seated in the chairs, seated on the cushions, laying on the floor, standing, really whatever feels comfortable to you. And then, if you like, you can let your eyes close fully or partially. And let's begin by simply listening to the sounds in the room. Just sitting in the midst of them, letting them come to you. And now in your mind's eye, finding your own body in the room, perhaps welcoming yourself into the room, or greeting yourself with an inner smile. Inclining toward yourself as you might toward a dear friend. And now dropping your awareness into your body and noticing the physical sensations in the body as they come and go. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And now particularly noticing any uneasiness in your mind or body, seeing if you can let your heart soften a little because this uneasiness is so. Just letting your heart melt a little. And if it feels right, offering yourself some words of encouragement. And now appreciating the effort and the good intentions that brought you here. Already an act of self-compassion. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. So that's at the heart of what we're going to be learning over the next 8 weeks. Just a little short taste of some of the things that we'll be practicing and trying to develop into habit in the time that we have together. Simple stuff, right? Nothing complex about that, but also not always easy, which is why we practice things, right? People practice golf because it's not easy, and the more you practice, the less horrible it is. The more skilled you get, the easier it becomes. And the more we practice being kind to ourselves, the more easy it will be for us to do it when we're really being hard on ourselves, when we're really feeling stressed or feeling like we failed at something or feeling inadequate about something. The more we practice, the more awareness we'll have when those moments come up, and then we can do something cool with that if we have a well-honed tool to work with. So what did we just do? We started by stopping. Jon Kabat-Zinn, some of you might know, started a mindfulness-based stress reduction program in the 90s that he used in medical settings, really to address suffering of patients who could not be adequately helped by Western medical strategies. And he said the basic idea is to create an island of being in an ocean of doing. We so rarely stop. We so often are doing and thinking about doing and thinking about having done. A lot of what we'll do in our time together is start things by stopping. Doing that lets you notice stuff in your body, outside your body, emotional states, physical sensations that we just don't have the opportunity to even observe if we're so busy doing all the time. And then the real gift of this curriculum is to add to that awareness some warmth, some kind feeling, just like we offer to other people often in our lives. And we are, most of us, less likely to offer any of that kind warmth to ourselves, especially when we're stressed, especially when we feel like we've failed at something, or we feel inadequate, or we're suffering in other ways. Rumi is a 13th century Persian theologian and mystic. I feel like everyone in Bozeman knows Rumi because we all have a backpack that has a Rumi quote on it. Maybe it's just me. But Rumi said, close your eyes, fall in love, stay there. That was his advice. He was basically asking people to cultivate self-compassion. That's what we're going to do in our time together. And we're really going to try to make it experiential. We are going to talk just enough conceptual information to have a map of the territory before we walk around in it. But really, this is about practicing and cultivating self-compassion and feeling that, noticing what that feels like. Tonight particularly, there's a fair bit of setting things up, a fair bit of talking, but the course really is greatly about either guided meditations or other exercises to help us cultivate our own sense of compassion for self and others. And of course, this is not anything I invented. This is curriculum developed by two people, Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. She is a behavioral research scientist at the University of Austin, University of Texas, Austin. And he is a therapist who uses mindful self-compassion strategies with his patients all the time. And those guys came together maybe 14 or 15 years ago and started to develop this. And it's going to be fun. There's going to be parts of it that are challenging. We don't put that on the big poster to get you to come here. Get ready to deal with your sad feelings. But there'll be some of that. And what's cool about this is we'll get to engage some of those feelings in a little different way. And then we'll see what happens. It's a little different for everybody, but there's certainly an abundant body of research that says this is not only cool to me, but it is cool and beneficial to a whole lot of people who have tried these tools. So that's what we'll do. The other person that you will meet in the next weeks is Caroline. She is a co-assistant with Jessie, so one of them or both of them will be here each week. They're here to help me make the room maybe less messy next week, but it's okay if it's messy. It's all right. And they're to be a resource to any of you guys. If during the breaks you have questions, or if somebody were to get upset and need to leave the room, one of them would follow you. So if you need to just go to the bathroom and you prefer not to be followed to the bathroom, you might just give sort of an okay sign to one of them. It could be awkward. So let's do another exercise. This one is a little bit different, but I am going to have you make yourselves comfortable. That'll be a theme. We're really, really wanting to be physically comfortable here. and emotionally comfortable too. And part of our jobs is to make sure that this is if not a safe space, a brave space. Sometimes that's the new word because it's hard to make a space completely safe. But we want it to be a place where people feel as little insecurity as possible. Make yourselves at home. And once you're in a comfortable position, if you like, you can close your eyes. And I'm going to have you ask yourself this question. Why am I here? What brought me through the door? And then ask yourself, why am I really here? And see if you can't peel back the onion a little further and discover something even deeper. Why now, at this particular stage in my life, at this particular time, why am I really, really here? And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. So we're going to do our first of many small groups. Anytime we go into a small group, it's mostly to share, or often to share, about the process, the tool that we're playing with at the time. It is not often so much about the experience that you drew upon to work with the tool. It's mostly about process. This is a little bit of an exception because you get to share a little bit about why you're here with each other. And of course, only share what feels comfortable. If what's comfortable to share is the first why am I here, then that's what you should share. There's no pressure or expectation that people share more than they're comfortable with. And you always can pass, and that's totally okay too. I think if we do groups of 3, we'll have one group of 4, and we'll take about 6 minutes or so just to share a little bit more of an introduction and why you came here tonight. So you can form groups. I will ring a bell to get us started. So once you're all grouped, we're going to start by stopping. We're going to take a minute and be quiet and take a breath, and then I'll ring the bell and we can start. So, big breath. You can begin. I wish I was in on all of those groups. Could hear juicy tidbits from here. And I guess I'll just take a minute or two to explain why I'm here. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm really into evidence-based medicine, which means if there's research to tell us there is a right way to treat a problem in medicine, then we embrace that when it's good quality research. I've been interested in mindfulness stuff and alternative healing traditions since I was 20. I went to the University of Minnesota and I took a wonderful honors class that was all about alternative healing traditions. And we had Reiki energy movers come in and massage therapists and chiropractors, all walks of different healing traditions. And you could just feel the potency in all of that, even though it wasn't something I'd had any exposure to before. But as a working pediatrician, I read a lot of research, and I've been very aware for decades about the value of mindfulness-based stress reduction as a way to ease suffering in people. And starting 7 or 8 years ago, I became aware of the research coming out about this, which is a little bit of an offshoot of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is using awareness and allowing your experience to ease suffering. This takes those things and then adds self-compassion. So the data started really pouring out 7 or 8 years ago. I already had a regular mindfulness practice. I was already prescribing mindfulness to patients in my practice and to parents of patients in my practice. And I became really interested in this, but it wasn't until 18 months ago. I was looking for something to do with my 20-year-old son, and I thought he would love to go to Sedona for 5 days with his mom and learn mindfulness. He had no interest in this. I was shocked to find out. None. And I couldn't get my husband to go. I couldn't get my best friend or my other best friend or my other best friend to go. And I was just intrigued enough, just curious enough, just hopeful enough that I decided to go by myself. And it was the 5-day version of this course in an incredibly beautiful place. And I just was lit up by it. I already knew the data, and then I had the experiential piece, and I just thought, everyone needs this. Everyone needs to know this, and I want to bring this back to my community and teach it to people and deepen my own practice and learn from everybody in the room for my own benefit. In fact, on the way home from Sedona, I had a layover in Salt Lake, and I ran into a marketing guy that does marketing for our business. And I started to tell him about it. And I had to stop myself. And I said, I think it sounds like I am intoxicated. So I'm going to tell you about it another time. But that was definitely, I just felt like I was on this giant wave of, this really can change the world, I think. So, not to overpromise. It is different for everybody, and I don't know what your experience will be, but that was certainly my experience, and I am really, really happy to be able to be here with all of you, and that so many people would say, yeah, I want to spend 8 weeks doing that. It's really something. We're going to talk a little bit of practical details and how we might approach this mindful self-compassion practice, and then we're going to do another exercise, and then we're going to have a break. Practical stuff. Name tags are a gift to the people around you. Mark Daniels. I'm sorry. Every class at the end, we'll take them off, and we'll put them in that little flower fabric thing over there so that they'll be here the next week. And then we can all put them on again. Because by the 3rd week, we'll feel like we should know everybody's name. And when you don't, you'd be at risk of feeling like a schmuck, and we don't want that for you while you're here. So remember to take your name tag off at night and to put it back on at the beginning of the next class. Schedule, you all know it's Tuesdays for 8 weeks. But just a reminder, we won't be meeting Tuesday, October 8th. I will be out of town. I am taking a 9-month mindfulness teacher training program in Bellingham, Washington, and we have a 1-week silent retreat. So I will be there, and you'll hear from me a little more by email in that stretch. The only other thing about schedule is October 26th is the Saturday, and in the morning from 9 to 1, we'll have a semi-silent retreat. really just full of all kinds of guided meditation practices. And we'll have a really lovely lunch that I will make for you. So that'll be great fun, and I hope you can all be there. We have a break every time we meet, about in the middle. That's a chance to get a healthy snack in the kitchen. We'll have tea if the hot water thing turns on. If you need a break outside of the break time, please step out, take a break. If you need a bio break, just go. Just let us know if you're going, because like I said, Jessie will be on your heels if she thinks you're distressed. Seating, you're welcome to sit wherever you're comfortable. You can be in the chairs the whole course. You can be up and down. You can be laying down. You can be standing up. If you feel sleepy, you may choose to either rest and just know that your neighbor, if you snore, will tap you, or you could stand or reposition yourself to stay more awake if you wanted to. And just something to consider when you come next time, consider choosing a different seat every time. I'm a person who tends to want to own my spot, but the cool thing about moving around is when we do small groups, we'll tend to pair with those near us, and you'll get to learn from more of us if we're moving around a little bit. Having said that, if you really feel most comfortable maintaining your same spot, you're very welcome to do that, of course. Workbooks, everyone should get one tonight. If you haven't already, we'll make sure you get one before you leave. Put your name on it so we know whose is whose. This is a lovely book. This is basically the independent study version of this course. It follows very closely with the layout of the course and has fantastic resources in the back, particularly a list of what is on the website of the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion and Kristen Neff. Kristen Neff, on her website, has a giant library of the 1,840 plus articles that relate to compassion practice, cultivation. That's the place to go if you want to learn more. Recordings. I will record audio of our sessions and then edit them down so that the only thing that gets shared with just us is my portion of the audio. So if you're not here in a given week, you'll be able to hear what we talked about, listen to the guided meditations in my voice if you want. There will always be links to other people's voice giving similar guided meditation on your follow-up email, and you're welcome to listen to those. What you'll miss is any discussion, and the reason that's all pulled out is for privacy. I don't want an audio tape. I don't want anyone to feel as though something you would say would show up somewhere else. It really is confidential and private to this room. And for that reason, I'll ask that nobody else record while we're meeting. Let this be the recording just so that we don't have that burden on other people to cull out the discussion. I'll ask that people not take photographs except when we take a big photograph at the end maybe, just to protect people's sense of privacy. Weekly feedback forms. On the back table, there will always be a stack of these with this little blue line. You can take one at the end of class. You don't have to fill one out every week. It is really yummy as somebody teaching to get feedback during the class and not just feedback at the end of the class. I really want to make sure this is meeting your needs. And so if there's something you'd like to see be different or more of or less of, or just something you want to share that was really working great and you didn't get a chance to share it in open group, let me know. So they'll be back there. And there'll be a folder you can tuck yours into. It can be confidential. If there's something that you want me to communicate back to you about, then be sure to put your name on it so I know who to communicate back to. All the follow-up emails will come through MailChimp because they're pretty and I like them. And that will be some links generally to practices that we've done in the previous class and whatever else I think is interesting. You'll definitely hear from me once a week the day after our class, and you might hear from me one other time a week. If you need anything from me, I am available to you in lots of ways, either through the email that we communicated about your registration. You have my cell number, and I'll put that on all of the follow-up emails, and so you can always text, you could call If you need anything, let me know. If you need anything in the midst of class, then both Jessie and I are resources while we're here, if you have any questions. And I haven't heard anyone's phone, so everybody maybe silenced their phone. Anybody have questions about any of that? Generally, how will we approach this? I think this is a bit of an adventure, more of an adventure than a journey. Anyone have a sense of why I might say it's more of an adventure than a journey? What's the difference between an adventure and a journey? Surprises, for sure. Uncharted territory. That's where we're going, and it'll be a little bit different for each of us. And there'll be lots of learning that can come from running into some of those obstacles, just like when you adventure around. And really, to me, this is an experiment. Everything we do is an experiment. This is like our laboratory, and we are all scientists, and I don't know how one tool will work for you or you or you or me. I have my own favorites, but I know you will have others, so we'll share very broadly lots of different strategies. But I encourage you to think of it like that, as a laboratory or as a test kitchen. We're going to make something new. It may be delicious, and it might be that we'll never make that thing again. So we'll just see every time we try something. It's really just trying to be a little open, a little curious. It's very okay to be skeptical of a particular thing or of the whole thing. There's actually data that says the people who have the biggest increase in self-compassion in a program like this are the people who come in with skepticism and open-mindedness. That pair is very fortuitous. So if you have skepticism, it's totally fine. You could also think of this as a playground or a playpen, which, not surprisingly, I really like that image because babies and little toddlers are constantly experimenting. They're constantly testing their environment and exploring, and this could be like that. It's really just kick around in it and see what comes out at the other side. And we'll all be our own best teacher to an extent. I will offer practices, but you're going to be the one to notice, oh, that one really resonated for me. That one really moved me more than that one or that one. And so when you find that, those can become your favorites. We are definitely going to come up against some difficult emotions because we're cultivating compassion. Compassion is a really positive emotion filled with love, and love reveals everything unlike itself. So as soon as we warm up, it can bring up lots of old little hurts that live in there that we, just keep tucked away. But as soon as you warm up toward that, that'll bubble up. And when it does, we're going to have a new way to look at it, to touch on it. We're going to apply some self-compassion and see if we can have a new relationship with some of those old hurts, which is part of the cool transformation that sometimes happens in this course. Really important that if what you're doing in this class is really struggling, that's not really self-compassion. Some of us are really prone to this. If you find yourself doing that, if you find yourself getting frustrated that you're not getting as far as you would like, see if you can have a little mindful awareness of that and work at not working. It is better to work at not working than to try to get somewhere, because you just don't get anywhere, unfortunately. So if you notice that about yourself, work at striving less, working less. And it's okay to be a slow learner. It's okay for it to take a while, for it not to be immediate. And it's good to have a beginner's mind, even those of us who have a lot of meditation experience, to be curious and open and try new things can really enhance the experience together. Somebody said they were open. That was their word for tonight. And I want to say a word or two about opening and closing. Opening and closing is this really automatic thing that we do. Psychosocially, emotionally, it is like heart valves opening and closing. It's like breath going in and out of lungs. It's a very natural process. And both sides of that are okay. So some nights you might come in and feel very open, or 1 minute of the night you might feel very open and expansive and like you really could get into a meditation. And then you might spend the rest of the evening kind of kicking and screaming and feeling like, oh, I can't settle in. And that might be because your physiology is saying, oh, you got to close up a little bit. It's like, people say it's like a faucet. Sometimes you can, have the thing fully cranked on and fill your cup. Sometimes your cup is really full and you just can have a little trickle. That's all you can hold. And your physiology knows something about that. So if you feel that in yourself, that's okay. It's all right to let that be and to not think open is good and closed is bad. They're equal and both important. And it's part of our body keeping us safe, keeping us from being overwhelmed. So be open to being closed. What do you suppose are signs of being open? What would be an indication to you that you're feeling open and expansive? Relaxed body, for sure. Tears, laughter, those can be signs of being really open. Some people cry easily in this room. Some people don't cry at all. Both are okay. But tears may come up very unexpectedly, and they may be very much about being open and not necessarily about being sad. There is a Tibetan monk, Lama Jessie, and he said, the way to practice compassion is with wet eyes. So if that happens, that's okay. It's okay. It will happen, I guarantee. But if it doesn't happen for every one of you, that's okay too. What might be signs of being closed? Distracted. What else? Resistance, annoyance, anger, judgment of self, judgment of others, other people's pencils going, I don't know, does that ever bother anyone? That might just be me. That is a sign of being closed. And so it just might be the thing that draws your attention to go, oh, I'm feeling a little bit closed. The quickest way to move toward openness is to allow closed states to be. If you realized you're closed and you just get gnarled up in it, it will stick around. And so if when you notice it, you can be like, oh yeah, that's my physiology telling me enough right this second. Then your physiology can undulate back and forth, which can be really nice. Sleepiness is the other thing that can be a real sign of being closed. So it's okay to be sleepy here. Like I said, you have two choices. You can take a nap. It is okay to do. It is an act of self-compassion. If the meditation ends or you snore, we'll help you. And you could, if you were not wanting to embrace a little rest, you could stand, and that would be just fine too. A word about safety. This is said to be therapeutic, but it is not therapy. I am not a licensed clinical social worker like some people in the room, and none of us can perceive what's happening internally with other people in the room. So we want to be attentive to our own safety and making sure that we don't get too overwhelmed. There's sort of this sweet spot when we're working with some of these tools where we're bringing up a little bit of challenge, a little bit of memory of something difficult, and using that because it really is a good space for learning something new. If you're in a really super safe space, then there may not be as much going on as far as learning. But we don't want to be overwhelmed. That's uncomfortable, and potentially it's not safe. I'm inviting you all to really try to be mindful of where you're at with this. And you might find you're doing something difficult, but you're not overwhelmed. And you might stay working with that difficult thing. But if you're feeling like you're pushing it, then you can do things to disengage from a practice. You can make your grocery list. You can feel your feet on the floor. You can feel your seat in the chair. You can step out. You can go have a drink of water. The guidance in general will give you a lot of outs. It will give you a lot of reminders about this and being attentive to where you're at and being safe. But that's something, because I can't see into any of you, that's something we each have to do for ourselves to try to keep ourselves learning, but also keep ourselves safe. Meditation. I'm so glad to tell you this class is not to make you all meditators. We are really here to try to be able to notice when we suffer and to be kind when we notice that. And we're going to use mindfulness and meditation just as a tool to help make that happen, really as a tool to help us with the noticing part. Because if you don't have a little mindfulness, if you don't have a little ability to notice, then you just walk around all day doing, and your emotions carry you places that you might or might not want to go. And if we can notice and then be nice to ourselves about that in the moment when that difficulty is happening, it's a real benefit to us each as a human animal, and then also to the people that we are in relationship with all day long. A lot of people feel like they can't meditate. If you can breathe in and breathe out and notice that you're breathing in and you're breathing out, you can meditate. That's all it is. It's very simple, but not always easy. And to me, mindfulness isn't actually the moment when you're aware of your breath, when you feel your breath going in and out. That's not really the key part of mindfulness. The key part of mindfulness is when you realize you're way over here and you go, oh, I'm thinking about my dinner for tomorrow. And you bring yourself back to noticing your breath. That's the moment of mindful awareness, is the coming back to. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, we got to have really good concentration. We got to stick with it. Don't let your mind wander. It's all about your mind wandering and noticing it did that. And that's the skill that we're trying to cultivate. So lots of people have concerns about having time to meditate. In this class, we're going to do 2 kinds of meditation during the week when we're not together. I'm going to encourage you to do some sitting meditation that might be 25 minutes. There's some really nice value to that, but the other half of what we're going to do is called informal practice. And the data says it's just as good as sitting practice. My anecdotal experience is it's nice to do a little bit of both, because I think they really augment each other nicely. And my sitting practice makes me better at doing my informal practice. But informal practice is just noticing that something is difficult, appreciating that actually connects us to all people, because everyone on the planet experiences difficulty, and then seeing if we can be kind in that moment. And there'll be lots of versions of that, lots of different shapes that will take. But you don't have to sit for 45 minutes of meditation a day. While we're together in this course, it's really nice if we can try to carve out of our whole day 30 minutes as a combination of sitting practice or informal practice, because this stuff's dose dependent. If you do a little bit, you get a little bit of benefit. If you do more, you get more benefit. And we try to be careful not to want benefit from this. We want to practice and be open to what happens, because wanting is not usually associated with getting very far. If you can prioritize half an hour in between the times that we're together, you're going to really see how much change there might be in you in 8 weeks. So it's a gift to you if you can do it. And on days when you can't, it's okay. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up about that. People who've done this course have measurable benefits that last. So when they take people who did the course a year ago, they still have benefits that they were experiencing at the end of the course. That, to me, makes me even more in love with trying to make a lot of room for the practice this 8 weeks. Because that benefit that you can get by the end of that time, you're going to experience in a long-term way. one word about introverts and extroverts. Who's an introvert in the room? Whoa, lots of introverts. Who's an extrovert? It's just good to notice that about ourselves, especially when we're in group discussion. If you're an extrovert, be aware, and maybe, and this applies to introverts in the opposite way, maybe work your growing edge a little bit. Like, I'm introverted. In a group, I like not to contribute, and when I do, it's usually because I feel such empathy for the person who asked the question, and I feel like they need someone to answer. But if someone else will answer, you won't hear from me. So as a person like that, it's nice in this setting to just play with offering something earlier, being willing to share your experience, which is equally valuable, before the questioner looks desperate. And if you're extroverted and you tend to like to jump in, play with sitting back a little bit and seeing what happens if you don't speak first or second. You are welcome to take notes during any part of the class, except try not to during our experiential exercises. One, because I want you to be able to try to sense something about your body during that time, and being engaged with cognitive stuff interferes with that, but also because of that. That will disrupt some people's. I mean, it's something to work with, something to practice with, but it's nice to save what you think you want to write down until the experiential practice is done. If you need to miss a session, that is not a problem, but try to let me know in advance. And advance could be like, a text 10 minutes before class starts that your house just got flooded and you're not going to be here. So if you can, let me know. It is perfectly okay to need to miss some sessions. If you miss more than 2 and you fall in love with this like I did and you want to change the world by teaching it, you have to have been to at least 6 of the 8 to have it qualify you to take teacher training. So just know that. Otherwise, we're open. And the last thing I'll say is, in this 8 weeks, while we're practicing this new way of trying to care for ourselves, see if you can broaden that a little bit and take care of yourselves in some other ways too. Maybe eat more in accordance with your values. Maybe get out and actually exercise more like you would like to be. Maybe get more sleep. Maybe drink less. But yeah, just, while we're kind of all about it for 8 weeks, see what else you can stir into the mix. Write a few words about how you would like to be treated in this space so that you feel safe and comfortable when we're together. So how would I like to be treated so I feel safe and comfortable in this program? Anything you ever write, you'll never turn in. That's all for you. But we are going to pull from your lists onto our list that will keep the whole course. And then I'll have you write about this. How would I like to treat others so they feel comfortable and safe with me? Yeah, and if I can get somebody just to help me write on our chart, that would be great. Non-judgmental. So important, right? Because, one, we don't know anything about the experience of the other people in the room. And truthfully, there's none of us that need to be fixed, So there's no reason to be judging someone else's experience. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Open-mindedness. Being open. Listening, like mindful listening, and non-fixing. Super important. Be kind and gentle toward each other. Yeah, and kind of as I think too about that and non-fixing. We're probably all better at feeling like you don't need fixing and you don't need fixing. Could we actually think maybe we don't need fixing? Would that be, could we actually be gentle with our own experience too? Patience.
Inclusive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of a version 2 of regard, right? We respect the experience of other people. And, you know, some of our difference we'll be able to see right in front of us. There's so much difference among us that we cannot see and know nothing about. So to be open and inclusive is really a gift to each other. This is like Vegas. What happens here stays here. Is it really like Vegas? Let's see. We're going to test that. We're going to test that theory in the next 8 weeks. Really, really important, I think. And something that, we should all go to great lengths to protect. So even if you're sharing with your family, I invite you to share mostly about your experience of the process. And even though, there'll be things that you hear that you will have a lot of caring for, really share about your own experience when you talk about the class. Confidentiality. How about respecting personal boundaries? When people feel upset, as human animals, we resonate with that. We literally feel that upset. It's super neurologic and also very cool. It's these mirror neurons allow us to really, literally resonate with other people's emotions. And sometimes my need to comfort you physically is about myself and trying to make me feel better. And just wouldn't want to assume that everybody likes to be touched. If you say to somebody, "Can I give you a hug?" It's very hard to say no to that. So we'll maybe try, if we want to provide comfort to somebody else in the room, to say something like, "Is there anything you need right now?" And if they need a hug and you want to hug them, by all means hug them. But I would just point that out, that not everybody is comforted or feels good about touch. So I'd be careful about it. 2 other things straight from the manual. Being mindful of romantic attraction. We'll have some deep feelings expressed, so just being mindful of that and not acting on anything related to that. They mention personal responsibility. That feels a little heavy to me, but it's getting back to the safety question and each of us having, just knowing that we need to be looking out for ourselves in that way, because I will commit to being careful with humor because I think I'm hilarious. I will personally try to be mindful about the use of humor. Last thing I want to say before we do a poem and go to our break is that everyone is welcome here. Everyone belongs here. Everyone has a voice here. We're all humans and we're all imperfect. So if there is a time in the length of this course where I inadvertently hurt your feelings or create a situation where you don't feel heard, I apologize now for that. And I encourage you to forgive each other and forgive yourselves if you inadvertently, in this time that we're together, hurt someone's feelings or cause them to feel not heard. Because we are all imperfect, and we will potentially all do that. So before we go to our break.
Start Close In by David Whyte. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in. The step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of starting the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To find another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear listening to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own.
When we come back from break, we'll generally do just a little 2-minute resettling, and like in the beginning, we'll call it a soft landing. And I'll offer a little guidance while we do it, but you could just sit and breathe. That works too. Let's take a couple of minutes to settle back into the present moment. See if you can drop into your body. And once you have dropped into your body, see if you can notice any sensations, either physical or emotional or mental sensations. And see if you can bring a component of compassion, kindness, gentleness to the experience that you're having right now. We're going to do a written exercise. So if you'll pull out your paper and your pen. Now have you reflect for a moment on the following. I'll ask you to think of a time or various times when you've had a close friend who was suffering in some way. Not a partner or a family member. They are sometimes too close. But a friend you really cared about who was struggling. Maybe they'd had a misfortune or failed at something or felt inadequate. How do you typically respond to your friends in such situations? Particularly, what do you say? What tone do you use? How is your posture? And if you take just a minute to make some notes about that. And this time, I'm going to have you close your eyes, partially or fully, and consider this. Now think about various times when you were suffering in some way, had a misfortune, failed at something, or felt inadequate? How do you typically respond to yourself in these situations? What do you say to yourself? What tone do you use? What's your posture? And have you take just a minute to write down some observations about that. And I guess the obvious question is, do you notice a difference, in how you respond to yourself versus others? So we're going to go back into small groups. And you need not share specifically the things you say to yourself. You can if you feel like you would like to, but that is not necessary. What I'm hoping that you'll share with each other is just some observations about the differences between how you tend to approach a friend who is suffering and how you tend to approach yourself. So we'll have groups of 3 and one group of 4. And maybe we'll pair up just slightly differently this time. And we'll start in silence once you get in your groups. We'll spend 5 minutes in discussion. And then we'll have a little discussion all together. You can begin. I am interested in whatever you want to offer the big group that came out of your small group discussion. I'm always particularly interested if anybody felt that it was easier, or if you were kinder to yourself than you tend to be with other people. The research says there's a chunk of people like that. Something like 78% of us are harder on ourselves, 6% of us are easier on ourselves, and about the remainder are pretty even. So that's true for a lot of us, that it's a pretty stark contrast. And maybe considering that stark contrast is a way to soften up how we are with ourselves a little bit. Or at least notice how mean we can be. Ooh, yeah, nice. What else? Yeah, I can relate to that. I think the words are pretty different for me, but boy, the intolerance is not something that I bring to other people. Mostly. Anybody else have anything they want to throw out? Well, cool. We're going to talk a little bit about the components of mindful self-compassion according to Kristen Neff, who really has a great story. She was a graduate student, profoundly stressed, found herself in the middle of getting divorced, and wandered into some mindfulness experience. And her graduate work then became trying to define self-compassion and trying to create a tool, a validated tool to measure a person's level of self-compassion. So this was her work as a grad student. And what she was able to create was an academic definition. An informal definition really kind of comes from the practice we just did, which is self-compassion is being as kind to yourself as you would be to a good friend. But we'll talk a little bit about her more formal definition. And she created a inventory of questions and a scoring system for that, and then was able to show that that was valid across different people testing the same individual. So it's a pretty big contribution to behavioral science as a grad student. And since then, since about 2003, she has just continued to explore the effect of this curriculum on lots of different populations, different cultures. This is taught all over the world. She says that self-compassion has 3 components. The first is mindfulness. You have to be able to notice that there is some kind of suffering in order to be kind toward it or compassionate toward it. Even if you're talking about compassion toward others, if you're distractedly walking down the street and there is a homeless person, say, who is in need of some money for food, if you don't have some mindful awareness, you're not even going to see that person, or you're not going to give that much thought. And without mindfulness, you can't gin up much sensation of compassion for yourself or anyone else. So that's why mindfulness is important in this course, because you got to be aware to notice suffering and to bring kindness to it. The second component, according to Kristen Neff, is common humanity. That when people suffer, it is not actually what it feels like, which is isolating. Most of us can probably imagine a time, probably not even that long ago, where you were hurting about something and you feel like you're the only person that is feeling this way. Really, the truth is that that is the human experience. That is common humanity. Not one person on the planet who gets through life without suffering. When we have that mindful awareness, she asks us to appreciate that that actually ties us to all people. That actually unites us with everybody else on the planet. We are, in fact, not alone in that suffering. Our exact flavor might be different, the amount might be different than other people, but suffering is universal. And when you consider there's 7 billion people on the planet, the odds are pretty good that somebody is suffering exactly like you are, to the same degree and in the same way. And her third component of mindful self-compassion is the self-compassion part, is the kindness to yourself. And that's the piece that we try to practice. So mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. So that's her academic definition. And it's going to become the basis of one of the last exercises we do tonight, and one that we'll work with a lot this week. It's called the self-compassion break, and it's going to incorporate those pieces. One of the things I like about Kristen Neff's description, she talks about the yin and the yang of self-compassion. Self-compassion is not all about love and warmth and nurturance. It can be really fierce. It can be the basis upon which we choose to protect ourselves. being kind to ourselves can cause us to act in the world. And that's more the yang side of self-compassion. So it's not about always accepting what is and being tolerant. It's about having some wise discernment and knowing what would be good for us, and that can be fuel to act. Things that you would anticipate if you told somebody at work tomorrow or on the bus or out and about that you were taking a mindful self-compassion class, what do you think they would think about that? What misgivings might they have about that? What could be, what might be their negative thoughts about a person taking mindful self-compassion? Like it's weak. Actually, good research, I am going to talk a little more about research, shows that people who cultivate self-compassion are actually better able to cope with stressful situations, trauma, chronic pain, chronic illness. They're actually not weak. What else might someone think? Sounds selfish. Actually, people with higher levels of self-compassion are more caring and supportive in interpersonal relationships. They demonstrate less jealousy. They're more likely to compromise in relationship with others. And they're more compassionate toward others, not just themselves. Making an excuse, absolutely. Truth is, people who have higher levels of mindful self-compassion take greater personal responsibility and are more likely to apologize than people who have lower levels of self-compassion. I have a college-age son, and when I talk to him about mindful self-compassion, he thinks he will lose his edge, that his self-critic is what motivates him. He's like, no, I wouldn't want to dabble in that. That'll totally undermine my motivations. But actually, what we know is that people who have higher levels of self-compassion are less afraid to fail, more tolerant when they do fail, more willing to take risk because they don't feel that failure is a catastrophe and a personal indictment. Let's do an informal practice. And let's stand up for a minute because I just feel like I need to. And when you stand up, like take a second, just notice your body. Is there something you can feel in your body that would like to be moved in a certain way? And can you move that way? So two things we're going to do this week a bunch. One is called soothing touch. Some people like to call it supportive touch because some people don't like the kind of, somehow soothing touch doesn't suit them. The idea is that we're going to use the warmth of our own hands to provide some comfort to ourselves. And this is physiologic. We have a system in our neurophysiology called the mammalian care system, and it gets activated by warmth and touch. It gets activated by soothing speech, like we all use with babies, and all cultures in the world speak to their babies in that same way, because it activates this system of affiliation and connection and is integral to human happiness. So we're going to try to practice exploiting that a little bit. I'm going to have you try a bunch of different things, and some may feel like not your jam, and you may come up with something that I won't offer. But I'm going to have you start by putting a hand over your heart. And take a breath. Allow yourself to feel the warmth of your hand against your chest, or you might even feel the cool of your hand against your chest. Maybe try putting both your hands over your heart. See if you can notice what that's like. Some people like to make a fist and put that here, cup their other hand over the top. have you try one hand over your heart and one hand over your belly. See what that's like. Maybe both hands over your belly. And let's try a hand on our cheek. Notice what that's like. Maybe both hands. Kind of cradle your face. Or you might try one hand on the back of your head and one hand on your forehead, and kind of press those hands toward each other. Cradle your head. Or you might try placing one hand on the other arm. Stroke that arm if you want, or just hold on. This is a nice nondescript form of supportive touch. If you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody and you feel like you need some support of yourself, try crossing your arms over your chest and giving yourself a little hug, and see what that's like in your body. Try rubbing your own chest just in a little circular motion. You might hold your own hands just in your lap and have a moment of noticing what it feels like for your two hands to be touching each other. And you might try something different, And really, we're trying to activate this mammalian care system, this affiliative system. And it turns out you can do some of that for yourself. You don't have to have somebody know you need a hug. It's a way to support yourself, to activate this care system, and then see how that feels. See what it does to your connection to people outside yourself if you're doing some of that. So we can call it soothing touch. We can call it supportive touch. You can explore other places on your body that might also be soothing. Something to explore this week and see what you discover. And then next week we'll talk a little bit about how that went. And we can sit back down. The last exercise, informal practice, it's called, is this self-compassion break. This is one of my favorite things. It's something that I do many times a day. So make yourselves comfortable. And if you like, close your eyes partially or fully. And bring to mind a situation in your life that is difficult, that is causing you stress. It might be a health problem, a relationship problem, a problem at work. Try to choose a problem that is mild to moderate, not the biggest problem you have right now. We're just practicing, and we don't have to take the biggest bite possible. Allow yourself to see, hear, and feel your way into the problem, to to the extent that you experience some uneasiness in your body. Where do you feel that uneasiness most? See if you can make some contact with that discomfort that you feel in your body. And then say to yourself slowly and kindly, this is a moment of suffering. Or you might say, this hurts. Or ouch. Or this is stressful. Or this effing sucks. The words can be yours. That is mindfulness. That is awareness of difficulty. Next, say to yourself kindly, suffering is part of living. I'm not alone. Others are just like me. We all struggle. And this is how it feels when a person struggles in this way. That's common humanity. And now, if you like, put your hand or hands over your heart, or wherever it feels soothing or supportive. Feeling the weight of your hand, the warmth, the gentle touch of your hands. And say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself what I need. May I accept myself as I am. May I live in love. Or if a bit more yang is what's needed, may I protect myself. May I give myself what I need. If you're having difficulty finding the right words, imagine that a dear friend is having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person, heart to heart? If your friend were to hold just a few of your words in their mind, what would you like them to be? What message would you like to deliver? And now, can you offer the same message to yourself? And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. And take just a minute or two to settle and reflect on that exercise. You can take notes if you wish. I'm curious if you noticed anything after saying the first phrase, which was, this is a moment of suffering. Any shift in that? Or the second or the third phrase. Anything that was interesting or difficult or easier than some other part. I do this lots of times a day, and I have an abbreviated way of doing it. So I don't conjure up a memory. I just am proceeding through the day, and something difficult will present itself. Sometimes it's my own difficulty. Sometimes it's difficulty I can see in a coworker. But my shorthand is to do this, which reminds me that this is a moment of suffering. And just flows right into, wow, this is what it is to be a human. And, well, can I be kind to myself? And it's kind of all encompassed in that. And in our office, in the back office where we are delivering patient care, we all know this shorthand. So sometimes I have my own mindful awareness, and I know I'm suffering, and I will do that. I'm behind, or I have to talk to somebody who's very difficult from whatever set of reasons, or we've had somebody with a really terrible diagnosis. Sometimes I have my own mindful moment, but often I don't. Often I am plodding through the doing, and somebody else in the space will do that. And it is like magic. It is like we are a grove of aspen trees, and we share one being, and now I'm aware that this is hard, that we are doing something hard together. And can we be kind to ourselves while we do that? And kind to each other? It's just really potent. And I encourage you, if you have either a work environment or a collective of any sort where people might be interested, I would teach them that. And I might even teach them the shorthand, because it's really cool. I'm so thankful when I don't have my own mindful awareness and I see it from others. And I'm really thankful when I see somebody else struggling and I can do that, and they know that I'm feeling for them, and I'm inviting them to be kind to themselves. Because, most of us do hard work, and even if it doesn't happen at work, life is hard. So those are the things we're going to practice this week. Those two things: supportive touch in whatever form you find most helpful, and the self-compassion break. And I will provide you some links to doing that, just as we did here, as kind of a guided meditation where you conjure up a memory of something difficult. But I encourage you to look for those opportunities during the day where you can go, oh yeah, like the day is just kind of full of, moments of suffering. And if you practice that, really neat things can start to happen. Anybody have questions about that? We are going to close with a poem. There's a lot of poems in this curriculum. Lucky us. So many good ones out there. I'm going to let Jessica read.
This one is Just for Me by Anna Villalobos. What if a poem were just for me? What if I were the audience enough because I am? Because this person here is alive, is flesh, is conscious, has feelings, counts. What if this one person mattered not just for what she can do in the world, but because she is part of the world and has a soft and tender heart? What if that heart mattered, if kindness to this one mattered? What if she were not distant from all others, but instead connected to others in her sense of being distinct, of being alone, of being uniquely isolated, the one piece removed from the picture, all while vulnerable under, deep under, the layers of sedimentary defense. Oh, let me hide. Let me be ultimately great, ultimately shy. Remove me. Then I don't have to be. But I am. Through all the antics of distinctness from another, or not really therein-ness, I remain, no matter what my disguise. Genius, idiot, gloriousness, scum. Underneath, it's still just me, still here, still warm and breathing and human, with another chance simply to say hi and recognize my tenderness and be a little bit kind to this one as well, because she counts too.
Thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing you next week.